And I wanted to just hop on today briefly to talk about elections, the elections coming up in Virginia, and then the midterm elections, and ultimately the future of our elections in general. And I wanted to do that because the other day I was interviewing the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta. If you remember that, he won a big victory from the trial court, the U.S. District Court in California, that essentially said that the deployment of federal troops, of National Guard troops in Los Angeles, supposedly to quell a rebellion. There was one car on fire, if you remember that, that was illegal, that it violated the Posse Comitatus Act. So that was a big victory for Bonta. But on the same day, he filed a different lawsuit because there are 300 National Guardsmen whose presence there has been affirmed by the appeals court. So what are we talking about? We're talking about soldiers and elections. And you know that this is a shadow that is kind of hanging over the elections. Is it possible? Is it really within the realm of possibility that American elections will have troops, military troops stationed there when people go to vote? And I think we all know that the answer is that it is within the realm of possibility. Pretty much anything is. So why today? Well, Rob Bonta, the Attorney General of California, he said something to me in a Substack Live interview that we did that you can see in its entirety. But I asked him about this case that he has now filed. And that case is an effort to block the Trump administration from federalizing those 300 National Guard members for another 90 days. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth did, obviously at Trump's bidding, is he extended the deployment of these 300 Guard members through Election Day. And that did not go unnoticed by the Attorney General of California. They want this stopped. They said there's no justification under the law of the Constitution for Trump to extend the deployment of these troops. And Bonta's worried, understandably, about the election. Here's what he said to me the other day. I'm not good enough to quite drop the clip in for you at this point. I'm not even to Substack. But I said, are you suspicious of this deployment to Election Day? And he said, yeah, we're suspicious. We have to be vigilant. We can't be naive. We're clear-eyed and sober. There have been many other attacks on the integrity of our elections, like calling Texas Governor Abbott and asking for 5 more congressional seats, Republican congressional seats. These attacks on voting rights, he says, are numerous. And he believes that this deployment of National Guard troops through Election Day is, quote, an attack on our voting rights and our elections. Another effort to chill, to traumatize, to prevent eligible voters from voting. And they're concerned about it. He says there's no reason for National Guard troops to be on the ground. And so he's asking a court to stop that. Well, I put that piece together with a few other things that I've seen recently. And it confirms, I know, what a lot of people are concerned about, which is that there is the shadow of presidential power falling over our elections, right? One of the geniuses aspects of the Constitution is that our elections are first and foremost belong to states and localities. In 2020, I was asked by one of my colleagues, because I had a little bit of a reputation at ABC of predicting elections. It's not really that hard. But in 2016, I told everybody I thought Trump would win. That they were quite surprised at that. And when it did, so I got this reputation as like the great seer of like in 2020, feels okay, you got 2016 right. What's going to happen? I said, well, I think Biden's going to win, but I think Trump is going to steal it. That's what I said. And I said, what will stop him from stealing it is the decentralized nature of our elections. The local election officials, those people who have those responsibilities and are proud, really, the vast majority of them have been proud to confirm the tally, the voice of their community, no matter what party they're in. That may be changing. Certainly the Republicans are trying to put loyalists in those positions. But, it was a good call because essentially he did try to steal it doing exactly that. This now seems to be part of the plan, which is that the elections will become increasingly federalized And that's what the concern is. The troops are part of it, not entirely. You'll remember that during the time that Trump was fighting to overthrow the election in 2020, he said these words: "I have the right to do anything I want to do." Now, this is actually from him on Monday when he signed the executive order for rapid mobilization of the National Guard across the country. And it echoes the kind of thing he said when he was desperate and trying to steal the election. So 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump said, "I have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States of America. If I think our country is in danger, and it is in danger in these cities, I can do it." And that was in reference to deploying the Guard to cities, which he doesn't have a right to do. Okay, so that's his mindset. We know this. This is a supercharged presidency. This is a presidency in which every pinhole of authority that the Congress accidentally or deliberately, with innocent stupidity, empowered the president, they're blowing it up as big as they can. All right, so Governor Newsom sees what this is all about, troops on the ground during elections. Governor Pritzker, seeing the troops now heading perhaps to Chicago, although the lawful basis for that is very difficult to establish. Trump has a lawful basis to deploy the Guard in D.C. because it's a federal district. Chicago? He'll make some claim that there's a rebellion there, but there isn't. There isn't even riots. Pritzker, who calls it as he sees him these days, he says, "This is not about fighting crime. This is about the president and his complicit lackey, Stephen Miller, my old friend, searching for ways to lay the groundwork to circumvent our democracy, militarize our cities, and end elections." That's what the governor of Illinois sees is happening. As Trump sends, under the color of enforcing immigration laws, he's going to send ICE and DHS, and they certainly have a right to be there. We might not like what they're doing, but troops, Pritzker sees that as part of the elections. Steve Bannon, on his podcast, he said the other day, he urged Trump to get these elections squared away. They're petrified about that at MSNBC and CNN, that, hey, since we're taking control of the cities, there's going to be ICE officers near polling places. You're damn right, Bannon said. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is something Cleta Mitchell said. You may remember Cleta Mitchell, one of Trump's lawyers during the 2020 election. She and Rudy Giuliani were kind of leading the legal effort to overturn the election, and they just got clocked. They got defeated in every single court. This is the thing that is deeply disturbing to me. This is a small digression. You already know it, but I want to say it out loud. And that is this: the way we resolve disputes about our elections in this country is under law, through the courts, and first through the election systems in the states and localities themselves. So at every single level of that election, there were local election officials, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, who certified the count. There were statewide election officials, either the Secretary of State or the governors of the state, who certified the counts in their states against all challenges. Those challenges could come up through administrative ways. You petitioned to the local county board that the election count wasn't good. You petitioned to the Secretary of State. You asked the governor. 50 states certified the election, as did the Congress of the United States. And as you know, every single time Rudy Giuliani and Cleta Mitchell brought a case saying Trump's ludicrous claims that the election was stolen, they lost. Now, that is the constitutional way we settle election disputes. To reject that, as tens of millions of our fellow citizens do under the leadership of the current president, is trashing our Constitution. That's the only way you can look at it. They snigger and laugh at that, but whatever. So Cleta Mitchell's at it again. I thought she was disbarred, but here she is the other day on a podcast with Tony Perkins, the Christian pastor and Republican right-wing leader. And she says, and she has been invited to the Justice Department, Cleta Mitchell, within the past few weeks to get a briefing on how the Trump Justice Department is looking at our elections. Cleta Mitchell, crazy Cleta, right? Lost every single case. Still on about Dominion voting systems and all the rest of it, and now looking to the next elections and has access to the Department of Justice. She says this: The president's authority is limited in his role with regard to elections, except where there is a threat to the national sovereignty of the United States, as I think we can establish with the porous system we have. She said, then I think maybe the president is thinking that he will exercise some emergency powers to protect federal elections going forward. They'll gin up some bogus election fraud story. The president will declare an emergency if he thinks that the Republicans are going to lose the election, and he can federalize the elections. He believes under that emergency power. So Mitchell's anti-voting group, Election Integrity Network, she called it, received a briefing from a senior official at DHS on how a database run by the department can be used to verify citizenship. So she's already in the game as to how they might do this. And then the last thing I want to note is that these powers you think are out of the universe of possibility under our election. The notion that the framers of the Constitution wanted the president to take over the elections and militarize them is as far from constitutional as it can possibly be, right? And yet, I think we're looking at the beginnings of a plan that if they believe it's necessary, they will do. And there is a phrase from the worst, one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in history, which was the Korematsu decision, in which the Supreme Court shamefully upheld the internment of Japanese Americans, citizens, for security purposes during World War II. It has since finally been overturned. It was finally overturned about 10 years ago. It had been lying around in the law. Thank God, under the pressure of a lot of people, that they overturned that decision, which allowed the president and the federal government to order the internment of American citizens based on security concerns. Finally, that was overruled. There was a dissent in that case by Justice Robert Jackson, former Attorney General of the United States, best writer in the history of the court. If you ever have a Jackson opinion around, you should read it because he was an excellent writer. Did not go to law school. Think of that. Apprenticed law in an office in New Hampshire, I think is where he's from. But he said in Korematsu, we have left a loaded gun in the Constitution. That the notion that the Supreme Court okayed the internment of the Japanese Americans was a loaded gun. And he said, someday someone will pick it up. Now, that loaded gun has been overturned, but there are others, all right? So this is from a case in the 1800s that the Trump people have already looked at and have begun to cite. There's a case called In re Debs, who was involved the union leader, socialist Eugene Debs, after the Pullman strike. There was a labor strike which threatened the commerce of the United States. That's what strikes are for, is to make a point that the unions, that working people will use their power to improve their position in society against the vast concentrations of capital, say, that we have these days. This is in the 1880s. Mm-hmm. And the question was, could U.S. forces be used against striking workers? Now, the case ended up resolved differently, but there is this language, this loaded gun in in constitutional law that Trump's people are already looking at. It goes like this. This was, I believe, the Chief Justice at the time. If all the inhabitants of a state or even a great body of them should combine to obstruct interstate commerce or transportation of the mails. Now, for those terms, insert elections. If all the inhabitants of the state or even a great body of them should combine to obstruct interstate commerce or the mails, prosecutions for such offenses would be doomed in advance to failure because they'd be drawn from a jury pool of people who supported their local governments. So the whole interest of the nation in having the mails delivered and the transport of goods delivered would be at the absolute mercy of a portion of the inhabitants of a single state. And the conservative justices of that time said, well, we can't have that. So they said this, but there is no such impotency in the national government. The entire strength of the nation may be used to enforce in any part of the land the full and free exercise of all national powers and the security of all rights entrusted by the Constitution to its care. The strong arm of the national government may be put forth to brush away all obstructions to the freedom of interstate commerce or the transportation of the mails. Once again, it would apply to elections. If the emergency arises, the army of the nation and all its militia are at the service of the nation to compel obedience to the law. We know enough about how this administration operates that any possible grant of power to be found in the corners and crevices of statutes or in dusty old cases that have never been overturned will be used. When you put all of this together, you do see the possibility of a plan emerging. Trump's own words, the words of people close to him like Steve Bannon and Cleta Mitchell, the action of the Secretary of Defense to extend the deployment of the National Guard past Election Day this year in an election where California will be voting on whether to redistrict in response to Texas's redistricting. And there's more. But this is real. As I say, the most important thing any citizen can do right now is to see the thing that is in front of us and name it. And that's what we're doing. Hate to leave you on such a downer note, but take heart. I can't get away with it if you know about it and you raise your voices, tell your friends. Thanks very much. If you like what I'm doing here, paid subscriptions are always appreciated. Go forth, do the good work. Thanks very much.